Good morning, dear students. We are going to begin with another lesson from our ninth standard portion. Let me ask you, have you ever been lost? What kind of feelings and thoughts go through your mind? Some would be very scared, while others would enjoy it and take it as an adventure. You'll try to seek help from others or devise some sort of plan to reach safety. Correct? We are going to read about a family that was lost at sea, thus coming to the title of our lesson, a synopsis, The Swiss Family Robinson. Synopsis is a brief summary or an outline of the main story. Okay, so now we'll begin with our lesson. I want all of you all to have your English textbooks in front of you all. Page number 6. All right, let's begin. The Swiss Family Robinson is a well-known adventure novel that people of many countries have enjoyed for more than 200 years. It has also been made into graphic novels and films. The novel, written by the Swiss clergyman Johann David Wyss, is not only just an adventure. It aims at teaching young people values like self-reliance, determination, love for your family, cooperation, and prudent use of resources. It also has good lessons relevant in natural sciences, good husbandry, and even mathematics. Some elements of the novel do stretch reality to a certain extent, but we must consider that it is a work of fiction and not a fact file. Given below is a synopsis and outline of its basic story. So here we come to know that it is a novel which has also been made into various other films, short films, okay, and you have also graphic novels based on it, okay, as well as we know who has written this story. Okay, he is a Swiss clergyman. A clergyman is a male priest. Okay, it this story helps us to understand how to use various mathematics in daily life, also the love for family, to be determined in order to not give up in various circumstances, how to cooperate with one another, prudent use of resources, to have wise use, don't just keep using and not think about the future. All right, so towards the end we get to know that the novel stretches reality. What does that mean? That there are certain things that are not entirely factual, but because it is a work of fiction, imaginary events being narrated. All right, so let us begin with the lesson. William, Elizabeth, and their children had been traveling in a ship when the ship was caught in a great storm. The other passengers evacuated without them. William and his family, including the young children, Fritz, Ernest, Jack, and Franz, were left to survive alone. They weathered the great storm waiting in the ship's hold. The ship survived the night, and the family found themselves within sight of a tropical desert island. The next morning, they decided to get to the island they could see beyond the reef. With much effort, they constructed a vessel out of tubs. After they filled the tubs with food and ammunition and all other articles of value they could carry, they rowed towards the island. Two dogs from the ship, named Turk and Juno, swam beside them. The ship's cargo of livestock, guns and powder, carpentry tools, books, a disassembled pinnace, and provisions had also survived. Now we get to know that the mother and father, William and Elizabeth, along with how many children? Four boys, all right? So you have Fritz, Ernest, Jack, and Franz, all right? And they were obviously very scared because the entire ship had been wrecked, all right? It had gone through a terrible storm, and a lot of other people who were on the ship either evacuated to leave and survive for themselves, or they were thrown overboard. That means they died in the storm, all right? Somehow they managed to survive the night, and the next morning they saw a tropical desert island beyond the reef. The reef, what is a reef? Nothing but stones and rocks and sand that is close to the surface of the sea. They constructed a vessel out of tubs. Now, a vessel does not mean what we cook at in the kitchen. All right, here the vessel means like a boat, all right, which they could float on water. After they filled the tubs with all the food and ammunition that they would require, all right, so whatever was on the ship and they could use it to survive, they managed to put it on the tubs and they rowed towards the island. Two dogs from the ship, that is Turk and Juno, please underline all these names, okay, swam beside them. The ship's cargo of livestock is nothing but like cows and you have chicks and goats that were traveling along in the ship. They managed to bring them guns, powder, anything that they could use in order to survive, all right. A disassembled pinnace is a small little boat, okay. So they managed to take all the things that they could in order for them to survive on this island, because they had no idea what kind of an island it was, whether there were people already on it, all right. So they needed things that they would require to survive. Let's move ahead. Over the next few days, William, that is the father, attached the floatable old kegs to one another and built a bow that curved around them. The family had landed successfully on the island. They set up a tent and softened the floor with armloads of grass they cut and spread to serve as their beds. They came to a grove of trees. One tree grew what looked like gourds on its trunk. The father told Fritz the gourds would make excellent bowls and spoons, and they cut them into various utensils. So then finally when they arrived on the island, all right, they had to set up a small little tent. A tent is a small like a cloth like structure where you can go in and sit and lie down, all right. So they had to do that along with all the grass that they had cut, armloads as much as your arms can carry, all right. So it would soften the floor for them so that they could use it as beds. They came to a small little group of trees, grove, all right, and they saw and they looked up and they looked at, they had these big gourds. Gourds is a fleshy fruit, all right, which they would cut and use as utensils for them to either eat as bowls and spoons, all right. After some days, Elizabeth informed William that she wanted the family to move to a safer place. Their current camp was not only exposed but also very dry and hot. If they built a house up in one of the large trees, they would be safe from jackals. She described a perfect tree for the project, one whose trunk was nearly 40 feet in diameter. The branches were very long and extended straight out from the trunk, making them perfect platforms for a structure. Later, when determining the height of the lowest branches, the father taught the boys geometry and how to use triangles to measure big objects. He measured a defined distance from the trunk, then he calculated angles using several measured rods, determining that the lowest branch was 30 feet off the ground. Now, Elizabeth, being the mother, alright, she had to make sure that the household was good enough for her family to stay. But she realized that since they were living on the coast, alright, right at the edge of the sea, She said that it was too exposed and it was very hot. All right, so she wanted to move a little more inside where they could, stay higher up in order to safeguard themselves from wild animals. A jackal is a wild animal. All right, and she had already seen this tree which would be perfect to build a house on. So the father and the sons, they began to work towards this tree house of theirs. All right, and the father taught the children how to measure the trunks, how to lay the structure and the foundation of the house, and also after using certain various rods and other instruments and calculating angles, he determined that the lowest branch was 30 feet off the ground. Okay. The men knotted a rope at certain intervals and attached pieces of bamboo in each knot. Thus, they created their ladder. Father returned to the beach and collected driftwood, thinking it would be perfect to build a sledge on runners rather than wheels. Later, they used it to transport materials. Meanwhile, Elizabeth announced that the garden she had been tending was producing healthy plants. Corn, melons, pumpkins, and cucumbers were already growing. The next day, only the father and Fritz traveled to the woods, exploring and finding such exotic plants as one with waxy fruit from which candles could be made. Fritz discovered a tree exuding a rubbery sap from which his father claimed that they could make boots. Now, when you're living on an island, obviously, you need to make sure that you have certain other provisions for your survival. Okay, you have to go and explore the island to see if there are other fruits and vegetables available for you to eat and survive. Apart from that, already know that they had built another house, so they needed to climb up into the tree house. So the father and the sons had made this little device where they had made a ladder using bamboo, and they stuck it in each of the knots. The mother obviously, sorry, a sledge is something that is like a vehicle used that slides on something. I'm sure you'll have all seen Santa Claus's sleigh. All right, so what he sits on, that is a sledge, and you usually pull it on something. Runners are stripes on which you slide something. All right. Elizabeth was already, started her own little garden, and she had produced so many various different vegetables like corns and melons and pumpkins. And the next day, the father and Fritz traveled and explored the entire island, and they had discovered various exotic plants. Exotic meaning something that is foreign. All right, one which had waxy fruit, waxy, that has a waxy coating on it. So if you could scrape the wax off it and melt it, candles could be made. Also, Fritz discovered a tree exuding to release a rubbery sap. A sap is like a gluey substance. Okay, and using that rubber, the father said that they could also use it to make boots. Let's move ahead. Thinking ahead of the next winter, father decided to create a place safe from the elements, a strong storage spot to protect themselves and their belongings. Fritz came up with the idea of a cave. Not finding one, they thought of carving out their own cave in the rock abutting their campsite. On the smooth face of the rock, father marked the dimensions for an opening, and they picked away at the hard surface with their axes, chisels, hammers, and shovels. Over the next several days, the family cut windows in the rocks to allow for cross currents of air and for sunlight to enter the cave. When they had finished, they had 4 rooms, complete with a fireplace. They now had a new winter home. Because of the low light, the cave house that they had built felt oppressive. To remedy this, Father and Jack rigged up a small light. They found a bamboo pole that would reach from the floor to the ceiling. Then, after securing it, Jack climbed on to the top of the pole and hung a large oil lamp that they had rescued from the ship. Now, we already know that because it's an island, it's hot, but they had to be prepared for the various other seasons that were going to come. So the father realized that they needed a another house that would save them from the elements. Elements, now he's talking about the maybe the real cold winds. All right. So he said that he needed a different house where they could protect themselves and their belongings. And Fritz came up with the excellent idea of having to live in a cave. When they went around on the island, they could find no cave. So they decided that they would rather carve out their own cave as a small little house, abutting their campsite, abutting something that is next to or sharing a common boundary. On the smooth face of the rock, Father marked dimensions. So he made certain markings which would have to be cut out or carved out so that they could have windows and doors. All right. And they used various other weapons and tools which they had already taken from the ship while leaving it. Then they had to make certain windows so that cross currents of air could take place. What is cross current? To have good ventilation where air could enter the cave, otherwise they would feel very stuffed up and claustrophobic. So then once they had finished, the house was, or the cave house was ready. They had four complete rooms with a fireplace, and they had a new winter home. So nice and cozy, and obviously a mother always knows how to make a house nice and cozy for the family. All right. And when they started to live in the house, they realized that because the the cave house was made out of stone, you couldn't have much light that would penetrate in. So they needed, and the entire house had a very dull, depressing look. In order to rectify this, to solve this problem, Father and Jack, they rigged up a new light. So they had a bamboo pole that they would place right in the middle of the room, and it reached towards the ceiling. And he would climb up, Jack climbed up, and he placed an oil lamp that they had rescued from the ship. And when you place light on a at a height, okay, you have more light that is dispelled. So in a way, they knew how to use their resources well to make their lives comfortable on the island. All right, and with this class we have finished with part 1. I want all of you all to read right up till here, all the difficult words, all right, meanings. I want all of you all to underline them, write down the meanings, as well as try to make your own sentences using these words. All right, it will be very helpful for your examinations. Okay, we'll continue the rest of the lesson in our next session. Thank you and have a nice day.